This video is brought to you by the good folks at KEH. Not only is KEH the oldest and biggest at what they do, buying and selling exclusively used camera gear of all sorts since 1979, but they do it well, with integrity and both a 180-day warranty and 21-day return policy, free shipping on orders of $75 or more. Which is why, because they make it as futz-free a process as possible, they are our go-to whenever we are looking to fund new purchases by selling our own gear or buying that special used piece of kit properly graded and checked when we want to go quirky or old school. Check them out using the special links and 5% discount or bonus code in the video description below. Thank you, KEH. There is a fifth dimension beyond that which is known to man. It is a dimension as vast as space and as timeless as infinity. It is the middle ground between light and shadow, between science and superstition, and it lies between the pit of man's fears and the summit of his knowledge. This is the dimension of imagination. It is an area which we call not that zone. I'm calling it the uncomfortable zone, and I dare you to join me there. Hey everybody, I'm Hugh Brownstone for Three Blind Men and an Elephant, and today is a bit of a lark, an experiment really, thank you KEH for sponsoring it, to suggest that one of the fastest and most interesting ways to take your photography to the next level is by doing something distinctly uncomfortable. Like deciding, as I did after sitting down with the director of the Henri Cartier-Bresson Foundation a few years ago, that I had an obligation, actually, as a photographer to bear witness. That is, to stop turning away from or ignoring the heartbreaking aspects of New York City, and instead, on occasion, and with forethought and empathy, documenting them. I will put a link to that video in the show notes below with Agnes Cyr. But today, I'd like to suggest starting with something a little easier to execute, a toe in the water, if you will, using a piece of gear which you know, or think you know, will make you uncomfortable. This is because it has been my experience that limitations can foster creativity. If you are like me and grew up with a 50mm lens on a 35mm film camera, for example, and now shoot the digital equivalent, maybe a wider than normal wide-angle lens might be a good place to start. Think beyond the equivalent of 35mm, past 28, maybe stopping at 24. This is my favorite wide-angle field of view. That's because it gives me that little bit of extra breathing room on the street without becoming so distorted at the edges that the distortion itself becomes the key feature of the frame. Instead, I find that width adds value either in the mundane execution of tight shots or adding drama and movement to a frame without becoming excessive. It is the widest I'm willing to go for environmental street portrait, groups of people, even ordinary landscape. In short, I've found it to be the most versatile of wider than normal wide-angle lenses for what I do. But there certainly are cases to be made for exploring even wider. I've gone as wide as 12mm full frame in my own work, but super wides are really specialist fields of view, think real estate and architecture, the latter being where I do play in the form of vertical urban landscape. Even so, I have found fields of view this wide to be exceptionally challenging for creative work on the street. Although, hey, maybe that's exactly the kind of reason why you might want to go that wide. It certainly stretched my boundaries, no pun intended. If you've grown up instead with a smartphone, You are likely already comfortable with a 24mm full frame equivalent field of view. This is today's standard, this era's new normal. So maybe as you move beyond the phone into a dedicated camera, already uncomfortable enough, I know, on the one hand, but a real viewfinder, actual bokeh instead of computationally derived OMG, you pursue an old is new again strategy and pick up a 50, or 50 equivalent, which, if one accepts Apple's nomenclature, is called a 2x telephoto, which it is not. But a 50 is a fantastic all-arounder, capable of covering everything from landscape to portraiture and sports, and with even a modestly fast maximum aperture, say f2, its ability to separate subject from background and foreground can be an incredibly useful creative tool. Well, for sports, probably nothing more exciting than lawn bowling, because Stadia sports are simply too big to close the distance between the action and you up in the cheap seats. Although, have you ever noticed that skybox seats are pretty far up there too? So let me give you some recommendations to get the ball rolling. My overarching recommendations for whatever focal length you choose being these. 1. If you are new to dedicated cameras and haven't already bought one, don't start with a kit lens, which is typically a zoom lens, no matter how good you think they may be. To my way of thinking, they rob you of critical learning opportunities, including A, learning how to see a particular field of view. B, learning how to employ selective focus, real, as I said earlier, not computationally derived. C, learning how to zoom with your feet and see the difference it makes in changing the perceived distances and juxtapositions among different elements within a frame. D, experiencing the joy and astonishment of just how sharp an image can be, especially when you make it bigger, when you print it. E, experiencing the pleasure and opportunities that will present themselves to you when carrying smaller, lighter, and less intrusively, than a zoom lens anyway. And F, enjoying the significantly higher image quality made possible in low light by reducing your ISO by 1, 2, 3, 4, even 5 stops relative to zooms, all achievable by using a fast prime. It's simply too easy, if you are initially uncomfortable with these fields of view, or any other field of view, to A, twist the zoom ring to a field of view with which you are comfortable, rather than stick with it and learn from that limitation. B, use program mode and deprive yourself of by surrendering control to the little chip inside of your camera, learning how powerfully, as I alluded to earlier, you can isolate your subject from foreground, background, or both that one cannot achieve at f2.8 or 4, never mind f5.6 of consumer-grade zooms, freed from the accursed move farther away or place subject within 8 feet messages that are part and parcel of a smartphone's portrait mode. But maybe you've already figured this out and are ready to explore primes. 2. If so, you don't need to spend a fortune on this experiment. I recommend that you don't. If you are truly uncertain, you can always rent gear first, although to me, that simply becomes a sunk cost. I prefer doing my homework, figuring out what I want to try, truly noodling it through so that my odds are far better than even that I'm going to like it, and then buying either new or used from a reputable seller with a solid guarantee, an excellent return policy at whatever price range you choose. If we're talking about going wide, going new, and going relatively modest, and I'll just use Sony as a stand-in for all full-frame cameras, I like Sony's $600 full-frame 24mm f2.5G. I really like Sigma's $640 24mm f2 DGD-NI series. And for the most budget-constrained among us, I'd be remiss not to mention Tamron's surprisingly performant and lightweight $200 24mm 2.8 DI3, I don't know, For those of us with a bit more to spend, Sigma's $800 24 1.4 DGDN art is fabulous at the price for image quality and shallowest depth of field, while Sony's $1,400 24 1.4 G Master has been a benchmark since its release. Although you can save a chunk of money by picking up a used G Master from KEH in like new minus condition for about $970. With all of this said, I went new, a 24 3.5 from Sigma for my SL2, and I went used buying a manual focus Leica Elmar M24 3.8 for my M11 from, you guessed it, KEH. Unfortunately, Leica doesn't make this one anymore, and people have figured out that it is an incredible lens, and incredibly tiny too. If you can find one, if you're shooting with an M, grab it full stop. But returning to Sony FE mount, I have to say, right now I use Zeiss Batis 25mm f2 is particularly interesting. This is a uniquely beautiful and ambitious lens, like the rest of the Batis lineup, state-of-the-art when it was introduced back in 2015, and it is still ranked as top of the pops by DxOMark 8 years later. I'd say that it doesn't handle chromatic aberration quite as well as the best of the new lenses, although DxOMark apparently doesn't share that assessment. You can buy a new one for $1,100, but you can also buy one in like new condition minus from KEH and save yourself about $300. In the world of Fujifilm APS-C, their new $1,000 18mm f1.8 is ab-fab, but with a field of view equivalent to a full-frame 27mm, it's just a little narrower than I like. On the other hand, one of my all-time favorite XF lenses, Fujifilm's 16mm f1.4, gives me that little extra bit of breathing room with the identical field of view of a full-frame 24. It sells new for $1,000 as well, but you can save just about a third once again on one over at KEH, again in like new minus condition. Micro Four Thirds, I like Panasonic's Leica DG Sumilux 12mm f1.4 aspherical, but that sells for $1,300 new, and candidly, I think that's too much. You can, however, pick up a like new minus copy, again from KEH for $775, at which point, now we're talking. Let's talk 50mm. I've never really enjoyed Sony's $250 FE 51.8. It is optically solid, but I really don't like its feel in hand, the noises it makes autofocusing. But hey, you can pick up one in bargain condition for about $120 on KEH, and it'll do the business. Still, I'd much rather see you in Sony's much better $600 50mm f2.5G. Yes, it's two-thirds of a stop slower, but it is so light and tiny and so good optically, so quiet and quick to autofocus, just a so much better experience. What I like just as much, even more, is once again Sigma's $640 50mm f2 DGDN I series, but to be fair, both punch above their weight class. Of course, if you have budget, Sony's $1,300 50mm f1.4 and $2,000 1.2 G Masters are the best in the business in that mount. Sigma's $850 50mm 1.4 DGDN Art right behind them, and clearly far more affordable if larger. Yet, the lens I actually bought for our A7R5, a true bargain in my book, was a used Sony Zeiss 55 1.8, also from KEH. As of recording, they have one left in excellent condition for $411. Or you could pick up a new one for $1,000, but this was an irresistible bargain in my book. It is one of the 3 launch lenses that came out with the original A7 in collaboration with Zeiss under the Sony banner in 2013 or 14, and it is also tiny, light, much smaller and lighter than the 51.4 G Master, yet super crispy at the center, even wide open. DxOMark rates this lens near the top of the food chain today too, although the state-of-the-art has moved on, and yes, the G Master exceeds it, again mostly in chromatic aberration. Still, it was a superb companion with quick silent bang-on autofocus mounted to our A7R5. That actually surprised me. For an engagement party, Claudia and I shot for dear friends, so no complaints. I wouldn't use it for video, however. It focus breathes like a dragon. So, if video is important to you, even though this really hasn't been about video, I'd suggest saving up for either one of the Sigmas or Sonys. I should mention that in full-frame L mount, the Panasonic Lumix Prime 1.8 series is fabulous. APS-C, I'd say the nearest 50mm equivalent right now in X-mount, and the best one in my experience with that field of view, is Fujifilm's own $800 33mm f1.4. But I'd also say that if I were buying new, I'd take a very close look at the slightly wider, $545, just announced Viltrox 27mm f1.2. It is a terrific, crazy ambitious lens. At just about the same field of view, Sigma makes the $300 30mm f1.4, and this was our daily driver here in the Batcave when we recorded our videos on a number of successive Sony a6000 series cameras. But fine for video. For photography, I much prefer the heavier and more expensive Viltrox. Anyway, that's it. A perhaps counterintuitive idea, and more than a couple of ideas for how you might execute it. But I'd love to read what you think in the comments section below. And if you like what you've seen here today, please do give a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel. For Three Blind Men and an Elephant, I'm Hugh Brownstone. See you next time. A big shout out to KEH for sponsoring this video, a great resource for finding just this kind of gear. Check them out using the special links and 5% discount or bonus code in the video description below. Thank you, KEH. If you like what you've seen here today, please give a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel, join the conversation in the comments section below because this is an exceptional audience. If you'd like help with a portfolio review, gear selection, finding or honing your artistic voice, sign up for a one-on-one mentoring video call via Zoom at 3bmep.com/booking. Finally, please consider supporting our work by using the no-cost-to-you affiliate links down below, sending us coffee money via PayPal, or most especially, joining us on Patreon, links down below as well. However you choose to support us, as always, we thank you for it.